World Regions Geography, Sub-Saharan Africa, Part 4. We're going to continue with the Fair Trade Movement. What the Fair Trade Movement is simply that either through nonprofits or commercial entities, they try to pay the people actually growing crops in developing countries, Africa, Asia, or South America, Central America, a fair amount of money for the product, which increases the cost of the product at the retail end, but gives them enough to be able to live and provide for their families. And so it's a way for small farmers to be able to survive against corporate farmers. Agriculture challenges and opportunities. Manufacturing and services. Output has doubled in the last decade. Microfinance programs. Microfinance programs are programs that are set up often by nonprofits that may have maybe only $100,000 or $50,000 to begin with. And they may loan individuals, particularly you see a lot of them in Africa with women's groups that may loan them $10 to buy seed in order to plant a crop. And then when they harvest that crop, they pay the $10 back plus interest, and that goes into financing more women. And what they've found is through this microfinance, one, they don't have to have credit, and two, typically they're more likely to get paid back their money. And so that continues to grow itself and increase and be able to offer more opportunities for women to become independent economically. Telecommunications, I'm sure everyone in the room has probably received at one time an email from the Nigerian prince who wants to put $20 million in your bank and just needs your banking information to be able to go ahead and deposit that money, and then for that he'll pay you a small 10% fee. Well, that comes a lot to do with the telecommunications. A lot of fraud comes out of particularly like Nigeria. Nigeria is an interesting country. It has almost 200 million. It's one of the largest populations in the world. It's a fairly wealthy country. It's an OPEC country. I know everyone's heard of Hollywood, and most people in the room have probably heard, or taken this course, have probably heard of Bollywood. Well, there's also Nollywood, which is the Nigerian film industry, and is really challenging Bollywood to create those movies for the third world, for Africa, for the Middle East, for those countries. And a lot of that is done in Nigeria. And then you have a huge informal economy. And basically what an informal economy is simply an economy that's not part of the GDP. If you drive around here, you might see somebody pushing an ice cream cart along the street, and you stop and buy frozen juice or whatever from them. You might see somebody at an intersection selling strawberries. Those are most likely part of the informal economy. In our economy, well, it's the same there. Maybe somebody selling fruits or vegetables that they grew. Maybe they made some cloth, or they harvest something. They make some jewelry. That's all part of the informal economy. Remittances are the money that people send home. Now, when we think of remittances in the U.S., we mostly think of either Mexican or Central American migrant workers come up here, illegal immigrants possibly up working in the Central Valley in agriculture. They make some money, they send some back to their home country, Mexico, Central America. They send money back there to their families. That's remittances. In Africa, Most often, these people are migrating either to South Africa, which has or Nigeria, but often into Europe to work and send money back to Africa. A lot of times you see, if you watch the news, you see black Africans migrating, particularly through Morocco into Spain. These are often people who are going to be sending remittances back to Africa. Strong recent economic growth. You're starting to see an uptick in growth. Excuse me. And part of that is the G8 has made a conscious effort at one, reducing debt in Africa, and two, increasing investment. And the other part of that is China in particular has poured a lot of money into Africa, particularly to produce food and raw materials for Chinese consumption. It may be 5 years from now, 10 years from now, we interpret that as Chinese colonialism in Africa. But as of right now, it is simply looked at as an investment. Inequality in development, large income disparities. If you look in Africa as a whole, income share held by the highest 20%. So in other words, in Zambia here, over 60% of the total income in the country is held by the highest 20%. But across Africa as a whole, it's extremely high. Large income disparities create a situation where you have large percentage of the population is very poor. If you look here, the third 20%, so that's the 40 to 60% of income. You go these two, this is basically, this right here is 60% of the population getting less than 20% or slightly more than 20% of the income of the country. This large income disparity creates environments where you can have a lot of political unrest, you have economic unrest, you have hungry children, you have lack of water quality, low life expectancy because there's not money for medical help when you do get sick, and you're in an environment which is tropical, which tends to have more severe diseases that are more easily transmitted from one group to another. The African Union is a political group of black African countries that try to promote Africa and try to go together to resist European and American influences. The territory and politics, most of you will recognize that man, Nelson Mandela. These are job seekers. If you ever go outside of Home Depot, you may see guys doing similar things. These look like the former British colony wherever they're at, because you look at it and it's in English. So apartheid, for those that may not be aware, is that system of racial segregation and power distribution where you have, in the case of South Africa, whites and Afrikaners controlling politics and the economy, and blacks living in very segregated areas with poor. Nelson Mandela got equal rights for blacks, and now they control the government because they're the largest portion of the population. So they're in apartheid. There was a geographic separation, so you would have essentially reservations for blacks. If blacks were not only considered Africans, but if you were Indian, there was a lot of the British imported a lot of Indian laborers in the last half of the 19th century and early part of the 20th century into Africa, East Africa in particular, and they were also separated. Pass laws, that simply means that you couldn't travel from a segregated area, black area, into a white area without a pass. In other words, you had to have a purpose. You just couldn't be going there, oh, I want to go out to dinner. No, that ain't happening. If you're going to go to work, that's one thing. But just to go there, no, you're not allowed. Homelands were these reservations that were created. They were essentially places where people were put aside into these groups. Civil wars and internal conflicts. Most of you are familiar with Rwanda and Burundi. The genocide that happened between the groups there. Liberia and Sierra Leone is where you see a lot of child soldiers right there. Children as young as 6 were recruited into the military, and often their first assignment was to kill their parents. And they fought wars. They're financed by blood diamonds. We talked about those a little bit earlier. Somalia and Ethiopia are what we refer to as failed states, where basically you have a quasi-government that virtually has no control over any part of the state, or very little control over any part of the state, including the military, the economy, education. They're not able to provide any services. They're not be able to protect people from anything. And you have the emergence of groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda because there is a power vacuum in a failed state. There's a peacekeeping presence. I don't know where these particular soldiers are, but but they're UN soldiers, and they're in many parts of Africa patrolling to protect against the genocide that is rampant in former colonial areas. As we said with colonialism, one of the aspects of post-colonial fallout, which is the result of colonial policies, is that these people may have been grouped together in a country, and they have animosities that go back centuries, where they have been in consistent strife for long periods of time, and then you exasperate that by growing populations and with a very small arable land, so they try to wipe out their enemy in order to seize their land or mineral wealth, whatever the case happens to be. And you have these UN peacekeeping forces that are all over Africa.